Well, good afternoon, good Sunday afternoon. Welcome to CROWD Church with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. Now, it is worth saying straight off the bat that yes, Sally is not here, despite what it said in the credits. Unfortunately, Sally can't make it this afternoon. But our thoughts and our prayers go with Sally. She's just feeling a little bit under the weather. So she's resting. So do pray for Sal. It's a shame she can't be here. But that doesn't mean we don't have an action-packed afternoon for you. Oh, yes, on the church live stream. I hope you've not been kind of putting off the Grand Prix, because spoiler alert, I may be talking about the Grand Prix during the live stream today, simply because of the fact it was amazing to watch. Oh yes, it was. Anyway, we might get into that a little bit, but this is in fact not about the Grand Prix. CROWD is church. So yeah, welcome to Sunday afternoon church. We are a church for those that may not understand Christianity, who may want to find out more about Christianity, for those that might not see the meaning or the point of church, and of course for people like me that have been around church, well, since Noah was around, basically. Yes, we've been here for a while. Oh yes, so wherever you're at, it's great that you're with us. It's great that you're watching. Oh, Sal's there in the comments. Hey, Sal. I'll try to keep Matt in check from afar. Yeah, good luck with that when you're not sat beside me. Yeah, awesome. Hey, Matt. How you doing? Hey, Nicola. Make sure you say hi. Oh, my lovely wife's in the comments as well. It's great. Sharon, hi. Good afternoon to you. It's great that you're here. Welcome, like I say, to CROWD Church. Do make sure you let us know where you're watching from. If you're new to the live stream, just come into the comments, say hi. See how everyone's doing. Antoine, Priscilla, you're in the house. Great to see you guys as well. Always great to connect with new people in the comments. Yes, it is. So make sure you say hi. It'd be great to meet you. And as we go through the service, the live stream, you can put in your questions, your comments into the feed. We would love to hear from you. Any questions, any thoughts that you have, we would love to know about them. Oh, yes, we would. Now, at this stage of the live stream, it would be typical of me to ask Sal or Rach, if you were with us last week, because Rach came and hosted sort of CROWD with me last week. It's that stage of the service where I say to somebody, can you please point to the WhatsApp number on the bottom of the screen? So we put that on the bottom of the screen like that. And apparently it's quite difficult to do. It's a lot easier, of course, when there's just one of you and the number's right in the middle of the screen. You can do that really easily. Anyway, that's the WhatsApp number. Let me get rid of those because we don't need those. You can reach us on that number via the WhatsApp, or you can go to the website www.crowd.church, and you can send in any prayer requests that you have, whether you have faith or not, wherever you are in your Christian journey. It doesn't make any difference. It will be great for you to send those prayer requests in. We would love to pray for you because we are a praying church. Yes, we are. Believe that God answers prayer. So if you have anything, send them through, and we would love to pray for you to the WhatsApp number below. On the church website, you can also go put in your name and email address. If you start that sentence again, you can put in your name and email. Okay, I'm really starting to struggle now. You can put in your name and email address, and we would love to be in touch with you. We just basically send out an email once a week. It's just a newsletter letting you know when the live streams start. And obviously, I now need to go practice how to talk. Okay, so what have we got going on here? Sally's what have you been practicing? Put your teeth in, Matt. Yeah, thanks for that. I do the questions. Actually, Matt, just so you know, I have a question from Nicola. She's already texted in. She's like way ahead of you, pal. So I've got Nicola's question coming up later. Again, if you're new to the live stream, basically what's going to happen is after the talk, we've got the amazing Dr. Will Sopwith coming and joining us in just a few seconds. He's going to do the talk. And after that, we're going to have a time of sort of worship and reflection. We have some music where we can sort of either sing along with or just, let the music sort of minister to us, as they say, sort of think about the words and reflect on them. That's going to come up after the talk. And then after that, we have what we aptly call I'm struggling. What we aptly call Conversation Street. Yes, that's the right name. Now, Will is going to join me for Conversation Street, which is where we're going to go through your comments. We're going to go through your questions. So as we go through the live stream, make sure you put your comments and your questions in there so we can cover them in the conversation street. And I will do what Sally says, and I will put my teeth back in. To be honest, you don't own the slot. Okay, so Matt and Nicola have got some issues to work out. That's all I'm going to say. Just show good, kind Christian love, you two. That's all I'm asking. Anyway, that's today's service. So like I said, we've got Will coming up. We've got some time for worship and reflection. Then we are going to go into Conversation Street. Then we have catch up. This week, Josh has done catch up. So that's going to come up towards the end of the service. And we are going to finish out probably somewhere between 4:45 and 5 o'clock, somewhere around there. The live stream will end. So please stay with us and please engage. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like wherever you are watching the live stream. And if you feel so inclined, why not share it out and say, oi, I'm watching church. Want to come watch church with me on this Sunday afternoon? Maybe not add the word oi. Will's just sent me a message here. That was a text message pinging. That's Will. Shall I join you after the talk? Yes. Absolutely. Well, if you're watching this, you can, in fact, that link I've sent you, you can dial in anytime and it'll just come through. Anyway, now, before I get into the talk, let me tell you that we've had a few technical issues. Yes, we have. So we spent several hours editing Will's video by putting the scriptures on there like we normally do, and some pictures and all that sort of good stuff, which is sort of all adds to it, doesn't it? Helps you view it, helps you engage. Well, unfortunately, for whatever reason, the sound again was not coming through on the video. This is why we were a bit late broadcasting. The sound just wasn't working. So what I've had to do very quickly is scramble. We are going to play Will's original uncut, unedited video, okay? It's a brilliant video. Let me tell you, the talk is brilliant. Will's is just a real casual kind of guy, just draws you in. You'll enjoy the talk. What's not going to happen is the scriptures won't come on the screen. So that is a shame. Unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do about it at this shorter notice. I don't know why it's decided not to work, but his original video is. Hope you're following this so far. So I'm going to play Will's talk. If you have a Bible, you can follow on with the scriptures because Will lets you know where he's reading from. We're going to be reading from Mark's Gospel, which is the Gospel, the book from the Bible that we've been working our way through as a church. And we're getting near towards the end. So you can follow on Mark chapter 15. Of course, if you're on the internet, you can follow it along on the web or just listen to Will read it. Either way, it works totally fine. So without further ado, let's get the talk going. I'll be back after this, but for now, here's Will.
Hi, my name is Will. I'm an epidemiologist and a public health scientist and currently working for Public Health England on a virus that's doing the rounds, shutting down the world. You know, you might have heard of it. And I'm here to talk in CROWD Church the first time today, which is very exciting. And the topic is the burial of Jesus. And in the Easter sequence, if you think about Good Friday, death of Jesus, Saturday, burial of Jesus, Sunday, spoiler alert, Jesus rises from the dead. Or if you want to translate that into our current customs, Friday, hot cross buns, Saturday, spot of gardening, Sunday, chocolate eggs. Go figure. And of the three events, the burial is a little bit skated over, a bit like the gardening on the bank holiday weekend in between Good Friday and Easter. It's not something that gets a lot of attention, and to be honest, it's not something that I've thought about a huge amount. So what is it all about? So let's read. It's the next in the series in Mark's Gospel that you've been running through, and the reading is Mark 15, verse 42 to the end of the chapter. This is what it says. It was preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. People who are crucified could live at least another 24 hours, sometimes into the next day. So Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. And so summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. And when he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. So, in Jewish tradition, burials happened very quickly. Once somebody died, there was a kind of a cultural horror at remaining unburied, and lots of verses talk in terms of curses of remaining unburied. And partly living in a hot climate, it was practical. People tended to get buried quite quickly, but not necessarily this quickly, as in this story. And what would happen is that the body, it wasn't in a coffin, the body was wrapped in a fresh piece of linen cloth. It was laid face up to the sky on like a sort of stretcher, a bier that was then carried. Normally there'd be a procession. You might have a professional mourner, a woman at the front sort of wailing and singing the praises of whoever had died. And there'd be a crowd of people. It might be the village, it might be the family. And death was a big thing in Jewish tradition. And according to Jewish law, if a funeral if a funeral procession passed you, as a good Jewish man, certainly, you were expected to get up from whatever you were doing and follow it for, I think, at least 10 paces or something as a minimum to show respect for the dead. So death was a big deal, and there was ceremony and tradition around it. And then the body would be taken to, for those who are wealthy enough, a cave that had been cut out of the rock, and there would be stone shelves as part of that cave where you would lay a body. And sometimes these tombs had several shelves, and a whole family would be buried in there over time. You could probably only afford one cave for your family. And then there's large rock to stop any scavengers, to stop the smell, I imagine, would be rolled in front of the door. So we have a description here of that happening with Joseph. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, well, Mark is a writer, first and foremost. And the Mark's Gospel that you've been going through, if you've been following these sessions, is first and foremost, it's an eyewitness, factual account of the life of Jesus. But he's a writer, and writers have narrative. You know, there are particular things they include or don't include, thinking about the narrative that they are bringing. So, what is it? What's the narrative of Jesus' burial that makes it an important thing for Mark to include? It's quite a short chapter, short book, Mark. It's a short gospel, and in 33 years there'd be so many stories to write, I imagine, about Jesus. But he chooses these verses to focus on the burial of Jesus. So what is the significance? And I was thinking about other burial narratives, and for me that means visual, it means movies, it means TV, and of a particular genre, to be honest. So these are some that I came up with. You might be able to come up with others, but 3 main burial narratives. There's the one where there is this kind of pomp and ceremony, think kind of royal funeral, crowds lining the streets, all the kind of stops pulled out. And it's often an exhibition of the particular culture of the person. The scene that springs to mind is one from the second Lord of the Rings film, where King Theoden kind of wakes from his stupor and he realizes his son's dead, and there's a full funeral, and he's dressed up in his his military gear, and he's carried out on the stretcher to the tomb, and the whole town is there, all dressed up in their military to honour the king's son, and his cousin Eowyn is singing this kind of haunting lament by the tombside, and the burial ground is covered with white flowers. It's a very visual scene, and obviously very sad. So there's the kind of the visual impact sort of narrative of a burial. It's kind of a key point in a story. But then another narrative, the second narrative I was thinking about, is the kind of graveside scene where someone's died and you've got a number of characters, sometimes quite disparate characters, gathered around the graveside, and often it's, as the coffin's going in and they throw dirt in, and the kind of scene. So The Godfather springs to mind, and James Bond seems to go to quite a lot of graveside sort of memorial things, and to follow up on a lead or whatever. And I think there was one in the Bourne movies as well. But anyway, that it's a familiar kind of scene. And then the third burial narrative that I thought of was that old classic, the somebody faking their own death thing, just to kind of keep the story going. So Nick Fury in all the Marvel films, I think he's died in 3 different films, and no one really believes he's dead anymore. And who else? Oh, and Sherlock, of course. Sherlock Holmes in the BBC, threw himself off the roof to persuade everyone that he was dead, to persuade Moriarty, and he took some clever chemical that made him look dead for an hour or something, and then he came alive again. And at the end of all those kind of fake death type narrative things, when the person suddenly reappears to characters, and it's that phrase of like, "But we buried you." There's something about burial that's kind of, that was final, that was closure, that was the end. So these are some narratives that I thought of. And it struck me that most burials actually centre around the people that are left. Fairly obviously, I suppose, the person's dead in a coffin or underground. But the focus of the narrative is around the people that surround it. So it's this kind of plot device to move the story on with the people that are gathered, for example. So let's look at Mark's narrative. And it's really interesting because it doesn't really have any of these. So it doesn't even have the kind of pomp and tradition of a classic Jewish burial, of the kind of the body being carried through streets. It's all done in a real rush. It's done at dusk, just before Sabbath, because they wanted to get everything out of the way before Sabbath, because you couldn't touch a dead body on the Sabbath. And in one of the other Gospels it says there wasn't even time to pour spices on the body. It was all very hurriedly done. So there was no parade. There was no kind of narrative set piece, if you like. There was no one even round the tomb side. Where were his disciples? Where were these friends that we've heard so much about in the gospel, that the people that journeyed with him? There's barely anyone there. There's this guy Joseph and 2 women. So there doesn't seem to be that narrative of gathering people around the graveside for the next bit of the story. So what about then the fake death? And lots of people have believed this. What about that actually Jesus didn't really die? He resuscitated, and then, so when it came to Sunday and he appeared to everyone, he'd not actually died. So it wasn't actually a miracle of resurrection. He was just kind of, that was the story that the disciples then put on it later on. But if you're going to fake someone's death, you'd probably want to do it with a few more people, wouldn't you? So here's this very rushed kind of ceremony, getting him to the tomb. There's 3 people there. 2 of them, the 2 women, their testimony wouldn't even stand up in a court of law at that time because they were women. So if you're going to fake someone's death so that then the body can reappear alive, you'd want to do it in a crowd. And if you were thinking, we're going to stage manage this and it'll look like he resurrected on Sunday, you would want to make sure there was a crowd. You'd maybe do that Saturday morning when there's lots of people around in daylight. So as a ploy, it's not a great one if you're going to fake death. But look at the people as well. So you've got a centurion, a professional executioner. This is the centurion that had witnessed the cross, that had seen Jesus die, and he's attested to Jesus having been dead already. Now, you would think he, out of anyone, would be someone that could recognize death. He does it daily. It's literally his job to say whether someone is dead or not. And Pilate, the governor, he's not going to allow a half-alive person being taken down from a cross. Jesus has been sentenced to death. The guy that's in charge of sentencing is not going to say, oh yeah, take the body down if there's any chance of him recovering, because he's then a free man. It's like, no, the sentence was death. So I think the weight of evidence of those two confirming that he was dead, is probably pretty sound, that this wasn't a fake. But then also, if you were going to fake a burial, I think you'd want to keep the account quite vague. You'd say, that, yeah, there were some people there, a couple of his disciples were there, but Mark names, he's quite careful to name Joseph, not just any Joseph, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a very prominent person, member of the council, respected pillar of the community, and these two named women. Now, if you were going to fake something, you probably wouldn't then give some named eyewitnesses that people could go and check the account with. So the whole kind of evidence around it being a fake burial, I think is pretty slim, to be honest. So actually, this was the end. This was finished. This was the end of Jesus. That is what Mark is writing here. This is closure on the life of Jesus. He died, he was buried. He definitely died. It's not a ploy, it's not a plot device. This is actually an eyewitness account of a very unusually muted burial of a Jewish man in quite a shameful situation. And this is very challenging, quite apart from the fact that then Jesus rose again, that physical impossibility of someone rising from the dead when they had died. But it's also challenging because if we believe, like last week it was being said, that Jesus was 100% man but 100% God, this is very shameful circumstances. And actually this is a reason why many people don't believe Jesus was God. Because they say, well, how can God possibly go through the shame of this public execution, this kind of hushed up burial with no real witnesses? God wouldn't do that. God wouldn't allow that to happen. It's just too shameful. And actually most Muslims would say that. If you talk to them, say, well, no, Jesus definitely wasn't God because he died and he was buried. And he died and was buried under quite shameful circumstances. So this passage is actually a real challenge to us for those reasons. So before we look at why it's there then, before we look at the significance of Jesus being buried, what was going on in those 3 days? What was going on between Good Friday and Easter Sunday? And I haven't really got time to go into other scriptures about this, but Jesus dying, the sacrifice of Jesus dying was to take on all of our sin as God, 100% God, taking on our sin and descending to hell, basically, and then breaking free because he was 100% God and because he was perfect, didn't deserve that punishment of sin, didn't deserve the verdict of death. So then he broke out again. So in this kind of intervening days, that's it. He was completely cut off from God. He died physically, cut off spiritually, and then came and rose again. And if you'll indulge me on another Lord of the Rings reference, the point in the Two Towers when it's clear that Gandalf didn't actually die in the mines of Moria in the first film, and he's talking about what happened. When I first saw this, I thought, that's it. That is the picture. And I don't know whether Tolkien thought that, meant that or not. But you've got Gandalf who's kind of hurtling down, fighting this Balrog demon into the depths of the earth. And you know, amazing scene of them kind of falling deeper and deeper and deeper. And then they battle it out for a couple of days until finally the demon is killed. And then you've got that moment when Gandalf suddenly feels breath back in his body and back he comes, and on the story goes. And actually that's a fantastic picture of what was going on. Jesus dying on the cross, finally defeating Satan through that death. battling and then coming back to life. But okay, so what's the significance? What is this closure about that Mark is writing? Why is he so keen to bring this closure, to write about the burial? Well, the first thing, as I think we've alluded to already, is that it shows if the body was dead, it was attested to being dead, it was buried, then the appearance of Jesus was a true resurrection. It wasn't just a kind of resuscitation. It wasn't a sort of vague, well, we saw Jesus on the cross and then no one quite knows what happens, and then suddenly he was back again. There was a definite clear, in Mark's mind, and he took the trouble to write it with those named eyewitnesses, no, the body was dead. So the resurrection is real, and that's the Christian faith. So that's why it's important. And the reason that the death and the burial was so important is because in order for Jesus' death to mean anything and the resurrection to mean anything, he had to take the payment of that sin, that rebellion against God, which is owed to us, that Jesus took on our behalf. And to do that, he had to die. If you're going to make a payment, so you get a car park fine or a Merseyflow Runcorn Bridge fine, for those of you local, there's no point in writing out the cheque, putting it in an envelope, even putting a stamp on it, unless you post it. You can't then say, well, I nearly made the payment. I went through the process, but it didn't quite get made. And so Jesus couldn't go through all the shame of the cross, be taken down, put in a tomb, unless he actually died. If he didn't actually die, the resurrection doesn't mean anything at all. The payment has not been made for the sin that is owed for us. It's still outstanding. So the reason this is so important is because without the burial, there is no resurrection. And without the resurrection, there is no forgiveness of sin, which is the whole point about the story of Jesus. And Paul talks about this actually and links it to baptism, and it's quite a good illustration of the thinking that, in the early church and in Christian thought now. And I'm going to read from the Message version from Romans 6, the first few verses. If we've left the country where sin is sovereign, sin is in charge, how can we still live in our old house there? Or didn't you realise we packed up and left there for good? This is what happens in baptism. When we went under the water, we left the old country of sin behind, and when we came up out of the water, we entered into the new country of grace, a new life in a new land. That's what baptism into the life of Jesus means. When we are lowered into the water, it's like the burial of Jesus. And when we're raised up out of the water, it's like the resurrection of Jesus. Each of us is raised into a light-filled world by our Father so that we can see where we're going in our new grace-sovereign country. It's just a beautiful description. And this is why the burial was important, because if we're to be free, if we're truly to live in grace, if we're truly to see the end of the sin that keeps on tripping us up, the kind of darkness in our life where we know we're not right with God, we have that shame, we have the guilt of stuff we've done. If that's not buried, and the analogy he uses, it's like going under the water of baptism as a symbol of that Jesus being buried. If that's not buried, we can't come back with new life, just like Jesus did on Easter Sunday. So that is why I think Mark writes about Jesus' burial. And please do think about some questions, some discussion on that. It's been great to share with you.
Great. Thanks, Will. How did you find that? Will's first time with us here at Crowd, wasn't he great? I just love his sort of conversational style. Like, he's just sitting down with a cup of coffee, just chatting to you. Do you know what I mean? No hype, no pretense. Just let's have a conversation about this. And I love that. And I love the thinking there that Will did. And I think Will was right at the start. No one really thinks about the burial section. Do you know what I mean? We talk a lot about the death, we talk a lot about the resurrection, but we don't talk about the bit in between. And actually, it's really important, as Will outlined. So we're going to get into that with Will in just a few minutes' time. So any questions you've got or any of your own thoughts or comments you want to throw into conversation, now is the time to do it. Get busy in the comments, ladies and gentlemen. And whilst we are busy doing that, we're going to have a time of worship and reflection, like I said before. And you remember right there at the end, as Will was talking, he talked about the what was that line? The grace that's coming out into this grace sovereign country, which I think is such a beautiful phrase. A country where grace is sovereign, where grace abounds. And that's what this track is about. It's about grace and about how God's grace, his unmerited favor, I think, is the official definition. It's God just does it whether or not you deserve it or whether you don't. That's what grace is all about, right? And so God's grace extends towards us now. Well, we are going to get into this track called Grace Alone. I am going to be back after that, and hopefully the beautifully talented and just beautiful Will Sopworth is going to join us after this. So here's a time of worship and reflection. Get busy in the comments. We'll be back soon.
I was an orphan lost at the fall, running away when I'd hear you call. Father, you worked your will. I had no righteousness of my own, I had no right to draw near your throne. But Father, you loved me still. And in love before you laid the world's foundation, predestined to adopt me as your own. You have raised me up so high above my station. I'm a child of God by grace and grace alone. Home to seek out the lost. You knew the great and terrible cost, but Jesus, your face was set. I worked my fingers down to the bone, nothing I did could ever atone. And Jesus, you paid my debt. By your blood I have redemption and salvation. Lord, you died that I might reap what you have sown, and you rose that I might be a new creation. I am born again by grace and grace alone. I was in darkness all of my life, I never knew the day from the night. Spirit, you made me see. I swore I knew the way on my own, a head full of rocks, a heart made of stone. Spirit, you moved in me. At your touch my sleeping spirit was awakened. On my darkened heart the light of Christ has shone. Called into a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Heaven's citizen by grace and grace alone. Yes, I'll stand in faith by grace and grace alone. I will run this race by grace and grace alone. I will reach the end by grace and grace alone. Heaven's citizen by grace and grace alone.
Heaven's citizen by grace and grace alone. Absolutely. Right. Let me get into this. Let me just take these off the screen. We don't need those. Oh, Will's joining us now, apparently. So true to the technical issues that we've been having this week, it's taken a little bit of time for Will to join us. Hopefully he'll be with us in just a few seconds. It will ring in my ears and then I will let him in. So what did you think to Will's talk? What did you think about that? That whole idea of the death of Jesus, the burial of Jesus, and next week, actually, Sharon's going to be talking a bit more about the resurrection of Jesus and why there is an awful lot of evidence for that, and why we should actually be very confident as Christians in the resurrection and that it actually happened. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's just a really fascinating thing to think about, isn't it? That, you know, what happened between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, besides the gardening, I think that Will talked about. What happened during those times? And Nicola, you've put here, never thought about without the death there would be no burial, and most importantly, no resurrection, no path to forgiveness. That's true. And the burial actually signifies the death, doesn't it? You don't bury someone alive. The death... The burial kind of signifies the death, if that makes sense. So, just getting some messages from Will. Here we go. Tried phone, tried laptop. Hang on, it's connecting. Tried on Chrome. Oh, it feels like we've got technical issues going on. So Will hopefully come and join us. Just not connecting. Oh, sorry, Will. I don't know why it's not connecting. So anyway, you keep trying, bud, and we'll see how we get on. What I'm going to do then, whilst Will is trying a few things, let's mix things up a little bit, shall we? Because we can. Because, you know, we have that power. Let's do catch up now. And then that'll hopefully give a couple of minutes. I'm going to call Will and see how we can get on with this. So let me play catch up. I'll be back again in a few minutes.
Hello and welcome to this week's Sunday catch up. For those of you who don't know me, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Josh Edmondson. I am a member of the team here at CROWD Church, and I'm a student at the University of St Andrews studying physics. For those of you who have not watched the stream before, welcome. It's great to have you here. Let me just quickly explain what Catch Up actually is. Every week we get in pictures and videos from members of the community, and we put them up on the stream in this little segment called Catch Up, just so that we get to see what everyone else is actually getting up to. In usual fashion, I will kick things off with something that I've been up to this week. At university, I am part of a society called the Christian Union. This week, we had an online Zoom event where we did a murder mystery, and it was really, really good. When people say that they're doing these kind of things on Zoom, I'm generally quite skeptical because, as with everyone else, after a year or so of doing everything online, I'm getting quite tired of Zoom gatherings. But it was surprisingly fun. So the way it worked was we split off into Zoom breakout rooms, and there was a suspect in each room. I was asked to play one of the suspects, and then the people that had signed up for the event would ask questions of the suspect, and then they would rotate the suspects around the different rooms, and so they got to interrogate everyone, and then they made their guesses at the end. My suspect was a St Andrews native, which is funny because St Andrews, if you didn't know, is in Scotland, and I'm definitely not Scottish. And so I spent most of the evening just blagging the Scottish accent, trying to get into the role of my character. Honestly, it was so fun, and by the end of the evening, I managed to even convince a few people I was Scottish, so I counted that as like a big win. And just in case you're thinking, Josh, what do you sound like with a Scottish accent? This is what I sound like. This was pretty much how I talked for like the entire evening. Anyway, that's enough for me. Let's get on to the catch-up clips. great. Thank you so much for sending those in. I love watching all the stuff that you put in for catch up. We love watching this stuff, so if you have any clips that you want to see on catch up, do send them in either to the WhatsApp number that you will see on the bottom of the screen, or you can use the hashtag CrowdCatchup on Instagram. That's all from me this week. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.
Well, okay, so as you can see, let's just go through the catch-up. One, I'm not sure about the Scottish accent, Joss. I'm just not going to lie. I think it needs a bit of work, but I'm sure you'll work on that over the next few years as you'll be up there. Now, Will still can't join us, but what I am going to try, and hopefully what will work, is getting him here via phone. So, Will, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. So do me a favour, everybody, in the comments. Just let us know if you can hear Will via the phone. I should put a picture up of him somewhere, but this is me and this is Will. So, Will, sorry about all the technical dramas today.
Well, I'm sorry for you, Matt. It's great otherwise, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there were some fantastic edits in that video. I have to say, it was amazing.
Brilliant. Everyone can hear you. And everyone can hear your kids going, Dad, Dad, too.
Yeah, that was Annalise exiting the room quite quickly.
That's brilliant.
She was watching with me. She was enjoying it. It's good. Good to have her.
Good. Well done, AJ. Love it. Love it. Love that you're here. So, Will, how did you find it doing that talk, bud?
Yeah, it was good. It was, I mean, as I said at the beginning, I've literally never thought about it. The whole burial is, that's just great. It was really good to sit down and think about, well, what is this about, and why is it in there? Because it's really interesting when you start looking at the Bible as a piece of writing, and you know, I've been a Christian a long time. I was kind of brought up in church, know the Bible, hear it read. You kind of get used to it, but when you look at it just as a kind of a bit of narrative and a story, you begin to question, well, why is that in there, and why has he done it that way, and why has he put it there? Or she, whoever's writing, and it was really interesting just to kind of dig into that a little bit and think, what is the particular purpose of this writer at this point for this story? And yeah, as I said, that it's interesting that it didn't really fit any kind of the thing you would normally use a burial for in a story, and that for me is a part of the it convinces me that yes, it's real. This is just an eyewitness account. This happened. And it was an unusual event.
Yeah, no, it's very true, very true. And I'm with you. You just, it's not. I have to say, I don't know how long you've been a Christian, Will. Probably as long as I have, maybe longer. About 30 years for me. And until this came along, it was this Easter was really the first time I'd really spent any time thinking about what the burial of Jesus meant. Which is quite fascinating, isn't it? How you can go that long through the Christian faith and not actually think about something. But yeah, so what do you think? I mean, you mentioned in the talk, apart from obviously you have a very, I think we have a very similar movie interest.
Limited genre, yeah.
Yeah, you definitely reference the Lord of the Rings a lot. But one of the things that you said in there, you know, about the burial of Jesus was the distinct lack of let's just put ceremony. If I think back to Prince Philip's funeral, which we obviously had a few weeks ago, and you know, Prince Philip, sure is a lovely chap, never met him, and you look at everything that was done for his funeral, and yet here was the King of the Jews, and nothing was done. I find that's quite an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the fact, just as a Jewish man, the fact that he didn't know that happened, but he wasn't just that. He was a rabbi. He was kind of famous, you know, in his place, and he'd really upset the authorities. He was like, he was a famous person at that time, and yet, there's none of that. None of what you'd expect from a normal burial, let alone a burial of someone who is well known. And I mean, I didn't really go into it, but some of the phrases we use about burial are kind of covering things up. And I wonder whether actually everyone just wanted to move on. It's just like, let's just cover up this slightly embarrassing
scenario of Jesus. We don't quite know where to place him. He's challenging our authority. Let's just get it over with, bury it. We don't have to think about it anymore. Let's move on. And I wonder whether that's part of that thinking in the story.
Yeah.
But God had other plans, and that's what's so fantastic about this account. That even though humanly speaking, it looks like the end, and it's a very quiet end, that is not the end of the story.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I like that. And did you find? I mean, you mentioned in there that for me, the takeaway was the burial was definitely the proof of Jesus's death. Right.
Yeah.
And all of these things that you talked about, the fact that, there was an executioner involved, the Roman centurion guy, the fact you talked about what Pilate wanted, the fact that, the Jewish leaders would have been involved in this. And so the burial proves the death, doesn't it? And that I thought was quite an interesting idea. Actually, no, this proves once and for all that he was in fact dead, not like Sherlock, taking some clever chemical. Yeah. Which doesn't exist, but maybe it does. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? But I thought that was really, really fascinating and such a good and powerful point that actually this is why it's important, because it proves actually Jesus did die.
Yeah, and the whole thing of skating over the burial and us kind of forgetting about it a little bit, but the fact that Mark made that effort to put it in a few verses as it is. I mean, Mark's a short book, but it's absolutely clearly in there, and I think it's in all the other accounts of Jesus' life as well. That it's like, no, we're the burial is important to spell out for that very reason, and I think, I think that's absolutely crucial to the faith of Christians and to that belief in the resurrection that we have this account. So I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
But as you dig into it, I'm really persuaded about the authenticity of it for the reasons that I said in the talk.
Yeah. No, I brilliant. I mean, in the talk, you talked about obviously there was Joseph and there was the two women there at the funeral, and he gets buried and put in this Jewish tomb, which was a cutout in a rock. The stone was rolled over, and that's quite familiar sort of pictorial stuff, I suppose.
Yeah.
I guess there's one thing that you mentioned was a lot of people struggle with the idea that God would die in such a shameful way.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think people have a view of who they think God should be, which is kind of hilarious, because it's like you kind of create God in the world. This is how I think God is. And you hear people say, it's like, well, I like to believe God is like this. And it's like, well, you've just kind of created your own version of God there, really. And what I love about the God that I believe in and Jesus is he confounds all that. He tears apart your preconception of what God's death should look like, if that were at all possible. And it's incredibly challenging, because it kind of just hits you in the face and you go, well, you believe this or don't believe it, but this is how it was. And I love that, because it constantly challenges my view of like, well, I mean, again, going back to this kind of script writing, if you were going to script the death of God in a film, it's not going to look like this. And so people struggle with that, because it's like, I thought it would be something like this.
Yeah.
But as soon as you take that step, you're kind of no longer allowing God to be God. I mean, like, what sort of God can't do whatever he likes, kind of thing? He's like all powerful. It's like God is who he is, who he says he is. It's not for us to decide what God can and can't do. So as soon as you get into that kind of territory of like, well, that it can't be God because God wouldn't do that. It's like, well, are you God? Are you calling the shots now on who God is? And there's so many stories like that in the Bible that really do challenge your preconceptions of what you think a godlike being should be. And yet it's there, and it forces you to kind of decide and go, yeah, does this fit with everything else I know of God? Does that fit with the faith I have? And the Bible doesn't pull any punches. It's very straight with some stories like that, which wouldn't fit any kind of self-respecting script writer if they were going to script the story of God. But there it is in the Bible. So you go, well, that just adds to the authenticity for me.
Yeah, no, I get that. I do get that. I'm with you. I'm like, I get why people would struggle with the shame in it. And I definitely wouldn't have predicted it. Like, do you know what I mean? If you're going to sit down and, like you say, write the story, this is not the way you would have written it. That's for sure. That is for sure. Now, I guess one of the questions that I get asked a lot, right? A lot of people email in with this one big question. And it's quite a common question is, well, why did Jesus actually have to die? Why did he need to die? Why did he need to be buried? Why couldn't God just forgive sins regardless? Do you see what I mean? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, and it's a tough question, and it's kind of, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it'd almost be easier if that wasn't the faith, because believing in a resurrection, a death and a resurrection, that's pretty hard, to be honest.
It's not normal.
To talk about, and people just look at you and go, "What?" But if you think about it again, if God is worthy of worship, and you've got all these characters of God that are described in the Bible, God is good, God is fair, God is righteous. He always does right. All those things are great, aren't they? They are worthy of worship. So if you've got a completely right God who is pure in everything he does, but then there's this kind of thing where he says, yeah, but on this occasion, I'm just going to ignore the fact that actually people are wholly rebellious, and the mess in the world and the darkness and the way people have just walked away from the perfect plan. Do you know what? I'm just going to forget about that. I'm going to quietly ignore that. And, some faiths do that because it's much easier kind of thing to believe, really. But immediately that whole character of God as righteous is like, well, no, you've just got a bribable judge there, is the kind of picture. You've no longer got a judge that's absolutely saying, this is what needs to be done about all this sin and evil. And you go, well, actually, on this occasion, I'll just make an allowance and just forgive you. That's fine. And it completely changes the character of God. And for me, God is no longer worthy of worship because he's actually just in our image. It's like just a person, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's like, I kind of like all these people. I'm just going to let them off all the rebellion. So it's tough. It's really, the judgment of God is really hard, and it's not a popular thing to talk about. But if God doesn't judge what is unrighteous, what is not good, then really he's not God.
Yeah.
And he's not really worthy of our attention at all, because he's just like another person. And so I think people can struggle with that sometimes, because people don't like the idea of pain. And again, the shame of Jesus dying. But actually it's completely true to the character of God as is described through the Bible. And if there wasn't that payment for the sin and that payment required from God, then God is no longer who God is, really.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. And Sally's actually put something here in the comments. She said the shame in it makes it all the more amazing that God would do it and do it that way, that his love for us is that big. Because you're right. On one hand, you're saying God is a God of justice, but on the other hand, God is a God of mercy. And so he goes, well, this justice thing needs to be sorted out. You can't do it, so I'll come and do it. That was the whole story, wasn't it? And so
absolutely, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Listen, Will, I don't know if you know much about the history of CROWD's Q&A time, but at the end of it, we normally have a question either from Matt, Crew, or Nicola Morris. It seems to be like this little 2-horse race that's going on. And so I'm just waiting for somebody else to actually send me a question. Like, I'm just going to get one as soon as the live stream ends for next week. Today, and it's never what you'd call a deep theological question. It seems like a tradition now in which we end off Conversation Street. And so the question is this, right? If someone asked to be your apprentice and learn all that you know as an epidemiologist, it's a miracle I can say that word.
Well done.
Yeah, what would you teach them?
As an apprentice epidemiologist?
No, forget the epidemiologist, just as an apprentice. Okay. What would you teach them?
What would I teach them? Man, that is hard. Okay, I'm gonna tell a very quick story that will give me some idea of how to answer it. So when I was an 18-year-old,
Yeah.
I left school and I went on a kind of it was a trip to South America where we were building toilets. Basically, it was kind of like, you know, experience helping communities develop and stuff. And on this team of 16 of us, there were a lot of people like me, quite cocky 18-year-olds, didn't know a Scooby-Doo about anything, really, but we thought we knew it all.
Surely that's every 18-year-old out there. I'm apologising now to every
Absolutely.
18-year-old watching the live stream.
It kind of comes with being 18.
Yeah. I was there. I've been there. Yeah, done it.
And there was this guy who was a few years older than all of us, and he actually had building experience, surveying experience. You know, he knew how to build a toilet. None of us knew at all. And we'd have these kind of discussions about how to be doing stuff on the building site or whatever as a team. And he would just sit there really quiet. And sometimes we'd go on for like 3/4 of an hour just arguing and basically sharing the experience of our complete lack of wisdom. And then he'd just quietly at the end just kind of come in with just a phrase that summed it all up, challenged it all, was the answer. But he didn't put himself forward. He didn't kind of join that kind of fight to be heard. And you know, his example has stayed with me first in my life. And that was a massive challenge for me as a cocky 18-year-old. So I think I would say to an apprentice, be humble and listen more than you talk. And don't be afraid to acknowledge that you don't know.
Yeah.
And just ask people and build that relationship to ask. Get off the whole kind of, I'm expected to know everything. I must be loud and make sure I know everything. So probably that's probably where I'd start. So the sense of humility and be able to listen to others.
Very good. I don't know if mine would be that holy, Will. I'm not going to lie, but that's I'd probably start off with a phrase like this: Matt's always right, and the sooner you learn that lesson, the better. I suppose the other way to answer that question is to say, look at my children, especially my sons. Hopefully that's the answer to your question. Anyway, well, listen, this has been an absolute treat. Again, apologies, everyone, for the technical issues, but at least we got to talk to you.
Well persisted.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I haven't been able to join.
No. I'm glad we found a way. Listen, Will, we're going to close out the live stream now. And so for those of you watching, we have next week, Sharon is going to be talking about the resurrection. Sal's going to be hopefully with us next week. She said in the comments she was. So hopefully Sal will be with us next week. So we are going to be here 4 p.m. UK time. You can obviously come and join us, join in the live stream. We would love to hear from you. And if I find this here, just get my phone out of the way, you can WhatsApp us any prayer requests that you've got, and you can reach out to us and connect with us via the website www.crowd.church. And connect with us that way as well. We would love to be in touch with you. We'd love to pray for you. In the meantime, we're going to close out with a worship song. So Will, thank you so much, bud. Really appreciate you doing that. Thank you for being on the live stream.
Great to be with you guys.
Yeah, bless you. Do you want to close us out, Will, and just introduce the worship song, which you have no idea what it is?
Yeah. We're now going to sing a worship song. I've got no idea what it is. It's absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I couldn't have done it better myself, bro. So we're going to play. That's it now from me. The live stream is going to end automatically after this worship track, which you can carry on listening to. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for persisting. Thanks for all of your comments. Bless you, everyone. And we will see you again next week. Bye for now.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. You're the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.